His fingerprints, Peter Vermes, are all over this club. I would take it a step further. His fingerprints are all over the city of Kansas City. I watched that town transform as a sports city because, in large part, of the work that Peter Vermes and Sporting Kansas City did. The longest head coaching tenure in Major League Soccer history is over. Sporting Kansas City and Peter Vermes have parted ways, ending his run as SKC head coach in his 17th season. Vermes paid the price for a run of 3 straight losing seasons, a 2025 campaign that was off to a league-worst winless start after 6 matches. Former Kansas City player and MLS Cup winner in 2000. Vermes then went on to become the club's technical director in 2006, eventually took over as the head coach in 2009. He oversaw the club's most successful period, including a run of 4 major trophies in 6 seasons from 2012 to 2017, including the 2013 MLS Cup title. Longtime assistant coach Kerry Zavagnin has taken charge as the interim head coach. Let's hear more on this story from our very own Tom Bogert.
Few people in Major League Soccer are synonymous with their club quite like Peter Vermes and Sporting Kansas City. Well, as of Monday morning, that is no more. For the first time since 2009, Sporting Kansas City will have a new manager for this club. The club has mutually agreed to part ways with legend, longtime manager Peter Vermes. Vermes took over as technical director in around 2006 before naming himself interim coach and then eventually the full job in 2009. He was one of the longest tenured managers in the history of world soccer. He was the longest tenured manager in Major League Soccer. Now that's Brian Schmetzer with the Seattle Sounders. But talking to sources across the league today, there was one text that I kept getting over and over and over again. I can't believe they actually did it. Everybody was surprised that Peter Vermes left Kansas City because the expectation was, at this point, he was essentially going to be able to stay as long as he wanted, as he's earned, because he's a legend of this club and everything else. Anytime you would talk to sources across the league, it wouldn't be about whether or not they should go in a different direction or whether or not there could be changes made. It was always, well, he's not going to fire himself. He just signed a new 5-year contract recently. Why would he leave? He's not going to leave. Let's not talk about it. So it was a lot of surprise around the world of Major League Soccer. Now what for Kansas City? Well, Peter Vermes' longtime assistant manager, Kerry Zavagnin, is the now interim manager. He was a player for the team from 2000 to 2008, immediately joined the coaching staff in 2009. He has been at this club since 2000. We'll see what direction they're going to go, and they need some changes. They need better performances. Kansas City have lost 12 of their last 13 games dating back to last season. The only game that they didn't lose was this year was a 3-3 tie with Minnesota, in which they were down 3-0 at halftime and had to come back and tie that game in heroic fashion. So things are not great around Kansas City, though they do have Dejan Joveljic, they have Manu Garcia, they have some good pieces to this team. Defensively is the issue. How are they going to get better on that side of the ball? How are they going to be better in defensive transition? We've been asking this question for years, since they decided that Ilie Sanchez wasn't good enough for this team or that they wanted to go in a different direction at defensive midfield. Ilie has won MLS Cup with LAFC. He's remained one of the best defensive midfielders in the league, and Kansas City still have not replaced him. The transfer window is still open, though they made their moves. They could use another center back. They were in talks to try to sign one earlier this winter, but nothing kind of came through, and there hasn't been any more movement on that. I have no idea where exactly Sporting Kansas City goes from here. It is a big hole that they've dug themselves in this season, but the overarching feeling has more to do with Peter Vermes' legend, his legacy with this club. He is the 3rd most all-time wins regular season in MLS history. He is a legend of this team, of this club, of this league. Sporting Kansas City would not be who they are without Peter Vermes. From 2011 to 2018, they made the playoffs in every single year. Over that time, they won 4 major trophies, 1 MLS Cup, 3 U.S. Open Cups. The last few years have been, quite honestly, very bad. It's been very disappointing. It's been sad. It's been unfortunate. But let's please not distract from how incredible this run was from Peter Vermes for a long, long time at this club. But again, for the first time in a long time, there's going to be a new direction for Kansas City. It's going to take a little bit of time to see a new identity because, again, Kerry Zavagnin has been with Peter Vermes this entire time. The club has his fingerprints all over it, as it should. The way that he modernized this team, the way that he brought them into a new era. They're going to need somebody else to take them into this new era, this new tier of Major League Soccer. It won't be Vermes, but his imprints will be felt around this club for a long, long time to come.
Outstanding perspective from Tom Bogert on this story regarding Peter Vermes, and I'm going to add a little bit more to it as a lifelong Kansas Cityan myself, because one of the things you heard several times there from Tom is the fact that his fingerprints, Peter Vermes, are all over this club. I would take it a step further. His fingerprints are all over the city of Kansas City. I watched that town transform as a sports city because, in large part, of the work that Peter Vermes and Sporting Kansas City did. We can't forget, at one point in time, one of the original clubs in Major League Soccer that was playing at an empty Arrowhead Stadium, was going through an ownership change, was thought to be by many across the league and across this country, Kansas City, in a market that was not viable for the sport of soccer or for Major League Soccer going forward. It went from that to a city that is about to, as market number 31, I believe it is, in the country, a city that's going to be hosting multiple World Cup matches in 2026. It would not be anywhere close to that type of city if not for the work of Peter Vermes and the sides that he had. When they rebranded the club, they built a state-of-the-art stadium in Children's Mercy Park, and they put trophies on the wall. So for Peter Vermes, it's not just what he did for the club. It's what he did for the city, Ian Joy. It's almost impossible to picture what things will look like without him because of the influence that he had. And I think at some point in time, it's been really bad here over the past couple of years. At some point in time, I think he'll be remembered rightfully for all of the positive things that he did, but it's going to be interesting to see where they go from here.
Yeah, well said, Nate. And I think it's important for you to have those words on Peter Vermes. I know how much he meant to you. I know how much, obviously, he meant to Kansas City. And I'll even go a step further than where you went to how much he meant to US soccer in general. I mean, this guy as a player, I remember watching him in 1990. That tells you how old I am, by the way. Impactful as a player as far as my story goes and is concerned. I remember, obviously, he actually came into the league as a coach in 2009 when I was just in the league. I was just thinking about continuing on in Major League Soccer, and I remember the impact he had around Kansas City as they were transitioning, going into this new stadium, and then obviously the state-of-the-art locker rooms and everything was sort of changing in the right direction. And in large part, it was down to that man and the impact he had, the say he had on how the training structure was obviously done, how the facilities were built. Every single youth player that came through understood and respected the rules and regulations that he set upon, how it should be to be a professional. And if you want to go on and be a professional further on in your career as a youth player, he set the standard. And I think that should never be forgotten in our game. He has obviously won an MLS Cup, let's not forget that, which is some achievement for a market as small as Kansas City. As much as I'm going to say it, it's a massive statement. Unfortunately, they beat Real Salt Lake in the final, my former club, but I still have a lot of respect for the job that he did do. I've met him a number of times. I don't know him on a personal front, but I respect who he was as a player. I absolutely respect the hell out of him as a coach and what he did do for the game. And all we can do as fans of US soccer and Major League Soccer, for me in particular, is say thank you to him for the great work. But I don't think it's goodbye. I think it's we'll see you later, because this guy's still only 58 years old. And with that experience, there are so few out there who have anything near the experience and what he can offer another club going forward.
I'm glad you mentioned what he did for American soccer as well. Part of that team that qualified for the World Cup before the World Cup came to the United States, the 1990 team, before it came to the U.S. in 1994, that was a really big moment for American soccer. And I'm going to tell you a story really quick, Ian, about what Peter Vermes' mindset was and is about trying to grow the game in this country. When I took the play-by-play job there in 2015, he sat me down in his office. Not many managers would have this type of conversation with the broadcaster. And he said, you have a very important job for this club and for the sport in this country. We have a fundamental problem in this country with our sport, and that is that our average fans don't really understand the game. The average American doesn't really understand the game, and that's because the broadcasters are not teaching the game the way they do in other sports. When you watch an American football game, the analysts, the broadcasters are educating you on the game constantly. But you can't educate somebody on the game unless you know the game yourself. You need to know this game. You need to understand it, and I'm going to do everything I can to help you learn the game. How many managers would take the time with their play-by-play announcer to do something like that? But that's the kind of passion that Peter Vermes had, not just for the club, not just for the city, but for the sport in this country, because you have to remember, he's one of those Jersey guys that fought for putting USA soccer on the map and a seat at the table at the World Cup. Yep. It mattered to him, and I think that that's something that should be remembered as well. And like you said, we haven't heard the last of him.
No, no doubt about it. I mean, let's just skip it a little bit further forward now. Obviously, for me in particular, I still respect what owners have to do. They have a job to do, and that is to, obviously, business-wise, make money, but also to be successful on the field. Hasn't quite worked out for Peter Vermes and for SKC recently. So what now? Where do they go from here? I mean, you understand the club from inside out. For me on the outside, I'm looking at maybe a big name coming over to a market like that. With that stadium and the facilities that they can offer, and certainly the finances are there for them to be able to attract some top-class players. They've had top-class players in that market. Where do they turn now?
It's a fantastic question. We haven't seen this ownership group make a hire to this point because they've had Peter Vermes for 17 years. I know Cliff Illig, the owner of the squad, and he is a man who, when they built the stadium, said, we don't want to just build a nice stadium. We want to have the standard bearer. And at the time that they built it, it was the nicest stadium in all of Major League Soccer. They want to make a mark. They are obsessed with having the World Cup coming to Kansas City. They don't want to have this negative momentum because the truth is apathy had fallen in when it comes to the fan bases. The atmosphere at the stadium hasn't been what it was in the early days when they opened it. I think Cliff Illig and Mike Illig, his son, will be deliberate about it, but they've got a lot of work to do because, as we've said several times, every corner you look in that organization, you find the marks of Peter Vermes. So they have a lot of work to do to decide how this thing's going to run from the top down. Where do they fit in what is an ever-changing landscape in Major League Soccer? The salaries are different now. The way you build a team, when they had those trophies up on the wall, most of those players came through the college draft. That's not how teams are constructed anymore in Major League Soccer. So they've got to adjust to the way the league works now. They've got to adjust to the economics of the league now. I think it's going to be really interesting. They've got a lot of work to do going forward, but they need to get this right.
I'm fascinated by the front office. I love the executive style of the game. For me personally, many people asked me what I was going to do after I retired playing. It was never wanting to be a coach. It was more so working around the front office because I'm so intrigued by difficult situations when it comes around our beautiful game. And that's what we're in right now. You've fired a legend of that football club. And you've got to be very particular with who you bring in next that's going to have an impact to those players, the young players who are looking up to this football club as a possibility of becoming a professional. And obviously his footprint is everywhere in this football club. So it's going to take a big figure, someone who understands and respects history, but is willing to go a step further to create a new legacy for SKC going forward. I'm really intrigued to see it. Great words from you. I'm only going to take a moment just to promote Modern Footy as well, because I cannot wait to hear what you've got to say alongside Kansas City Wizards legend Tony Meola. Modern Footy, man, that's going to be epic.
Big Tones and Peter Vermes go hand in hand. They won a supporter shield. They won MLS Cup together. They're Jersey guys. They've known each other forever. I can't wait to talk to Tony about that as well. So Morning Footy, thanks for giving me the plug on that, because it's weird timing how that works. I don't enjoy talking about this part of it, but we got to make sure we honor a man that's been a legend in American soccer.